scientist Donald Hoffman, who said that time and space is doomed, and he said that with a lot of truth. Now, I wanted to ask you, in terms of Advaita Vedanta, what is time? Is time real, or is it all an illusion?
That's a difficult question. These are really deep, fundamental questions. From an Advaitic perspective, time and space it's like the stage on which the drama of the universe is being played. So it gives us the framework, the background in which the infinite can appear as this multiplicity. Swami Vivekananda said, this universe is the wreckage of the infinite on the shores of time, space, and causation. Now, the moment you say this, one notices that you are privileging some other ultimate reality above time and space. So time and space are somewhere down in the hierarchy. So there is a reality beyond time, there is a reality beyond space, which appearing through time and space are experienced as this universe of ours. There is this distance, space is there, and the flow of time seems to be there. So time and space, in a Vedantic perspective, is like the floor on which a theatrical performance is taking place. Not ultimately real, but cannot be dismissed as unreal either.
Wow. Okay, no, that's a lot to take in, but thank you. I also wanted to talk to you about death. Now, this is like probably one of the top 5 topics in philosophy. So many people, at least at one point of their lives, question the concept of death. And I wanted to ask you, especially in the context of Advaita Vedanta, that do we ever actually die? And if we do, what part of us dies?
That's actually a central question in Vedanta, in fact, in all kinds of spirituality. And I would say even to all human beings, it's a very deep question for us, because as human beings, we are acutely aware of our mortality. We can push it to the background of our thinking, but one day or the other, we are confronted when we especially see the death of a beloved person. We are somehow lifted up from our mundane quotidian life into something higher or something deeper when we are confronted with death of somebody, especially somebody you knew closely, or when we see death on a huge scale, on TV or in the news. So this, we are confronted with it, whether you are spiritual or philosophical, you're not, you're just living your life, but death is always present. Now, Vedanta says, like you said, we don't really die. It's just the opposite of what we commonly hold to be the one truth of our lives. We all think that whatever there is, maybe there's God, maybe there isn't, but I know for sure I'm going to die. And Vedanta says, you're not going to die. We are that reality which is beyond time and space, which is called Atman or Brahman, which does not change. And since it does not change, the change is something that happens within time. So if there's at all something beyond time, it won't change. If it doesn't change, it won't die. In fact, it gets even weirder. Vedanta will say that you actually were not even born. It's the body which is born, it's the body which ages, and it's the body which ultimately dies. Physically, it dissolves back into nature from which it came. But you, the conscious being, you don't die. Now, there is a little bit of a wrinkle here, a little a distinction to be understood. According to Vedanta, we, as this embodied being, this sentient being, we actually have these two aspects. One is, right now when we look into ourselves, thoughts, feelings, ideas, memories, desires, just the person that I am. I mean, this body is there, but the person I am is something that I feel directly within myself. So that's called this subtle body. The thoughts, feelings, emotions, the prana, the life forces, all of it, it's a package. It's called the subtle body. And that does not die with the death of the physical body. Often, little ambiguously in English, it's sometimes called the soul. So it's an immortal soul which comes in from past lives, takes this birth, and when this body dies, it goes on to future lives. And this is it's a belief, but it's a common belief across Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, all the Indian religions, in fact. Even the Middle Eastern religions, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Islam, they also believe in the immortal soul, that there is something that survives the death of the body. So all religions, starting from the most primitive ones, they believe there is something surviving the death of the body. And there's a second aspect to it. Vedanta says even this is not your real nature. You are actually beyond the subtle body. You are this limitless existence consciousness place. So there are these 3 levels of our existence. The physical body, which is going to die. And the subtle body, which is not going to die, but is going to take up future bodies and will experience birth and death of those bodies. And beyond both of these, physical body and subtle body, is the Atman, consciousness, awareness, pure consciousness, pure being. So that's our real nature, and that's immortal.
Wow. Because we are talking about death, I wanted to touch a topic of near-death experiences. And the reason I want to touch it is because, not just because it's a popular topic, but because it's allowing the public to question what death really is. When a lot of these, whether it's kids or adults, they're having near-death experiences, it's allowing families and people to consider that what really happened. What is death? I haven't told this to many people, but I had an experience in US around 2-3 years ago, a few months before I met you initially. And I kind of had an asthma attack, right? And at that point, I did not know I had asthma. And it was happening for a couple of weeks. I used to go to the hospital and doctor, and I would do checkups, and they couldn't actually pinpoint it. Sometimes asthma comes out of nowhere. It's not like you're born with it. And my lungs used to just suffocate, and I used to have trouble breathing. I tried inhalers, even they weren't working. There's so many different kinds of inhalers. I was doing an audition with a friend once at home, and my lungs suffocated while I was helping him with the audition. We were reading scripts, and I just stopped breathing. And towards the beginning, I was like, oh no, there's no way I'm just going to die, because in the beginning you have a denial, right? But then a point came where I completely kind of just was turning blue or purple, and I couldn't breathe. I was trying my hardest to take every single breath left inside my body. And I went down the stairs and I went outside. I told my friend to call the ambulance, and the ambulance was on their way. But a couple minutes before the ambulance came, I collapsed. And this is what I want to talk specifically about my experience there. A lot of times you're scared of death, and even I was at that point. But for some reason, during those few moments, I felt some sort of release. And I don't know what it was, but all my memories kind of just came all at once with me. And then I saw some sort of bright light. I don't know what exactly it was, but when I woke up in the hospital, not knowing what happened, it was like 10-15 minutes later, they told me they had to, I think it was CPR or whatever, they had to do a proper procedure. And they said I was dead for probably a couple seconds. And that completely changed my life. That's when I first started talking to my mom about spirituality, the meaning of life, the purpose of life. And that's when I first started coming to Vedanta. I wanted to ask you, what happens in these near-death experiences from a Advaita Vedanta point of view? What happens when you feel like a certain, and I was talking to Sunil Maharaj as well in Almora, and he said he had a near-death experience. He actually suffers from asthma as well. And he said that he had an astral body experience where when he kind of had an asthma attack and he was in the hospital and his body was one place and he was in another place, and he was saying that. So what, in your understanding, kind of happens during these near-death experiences?
Right. I mean, it's a terribly difficult experience, but in some sense, as you would agree, it's also a valuable experience. Right? It transformed your life. And I have heard of similar experiences from a number of people. There was this conference I went to, the theme was near-death experiences.
Oh, wait.
So
okay.
There were scholars who were talking about it. There were people who had actually had near-death experiences. This was in Dallas a few years ago. The Advaita Vedanta has a clear framework about this. And most of the spiritual systems of the world, they do. It's something that they know very well. So idea is this. We have a physical body, this one. This is the one which everybody can see. And this is the one which the doctor examines and tries to treat and cure. But we have a subtle body. And that's nothing esoteric or mysterious because we all feel it. We all feel emotions, ideas. We all have a personality, and there's prana. So the subtle body is there. In Vedanta, the technical terms for that is the pranamaya, the manomaya, the vijnanamaya, and the seed state called the anandamaya. So the pranamaya would be the vital body, and then the manomaya, the mental body, the intellectual body, vijnanamaya, and their seed state or causal state when they sort of curl up into a seed in deep sleep, for example, or at the point of the physical death. So now the idea is when the physical body can no longer support the subtle body, maybe it's too damaged, or maybe it's dying, then the subtle body is supposed to physically leave the dying body. And this process is called utkramana. Utkramana means transmigration, leaving the arising out of, literally, arising out of and proceeding. Now, an interesting thing I read recently from a report from neuroscientists. One mystery it seems they are facing is that at the point of death, the dying brain actually becomes suddenly very active. You wouldn't expect that. An organ which is dying would start to deteriorate and finally give up, collapse. But they find this fMRI scans of the brain at the point of death. They show that there is sudden burst of activity, including, release of dopamine and other biochemicals in the brain, which are related to wellness. When you get a feeling of wellness, serotonin, dopamine, those are released, it seems. And this is a technical thing I don't understand, but I was just reading it. And various centers of the brain, it seems, they light up for no particular reason at all. It's like the centers related to memory, for example. You see, you said, and many people who have had near-death experiences, they say, suddenly there's an onrush of all memories of the past. Suddenly they seem to come together. Now, what I'm guessing, it's only a guess. I was very surprised and delighted to see that report, because this is a kind of confirmation, a brain-level confirmation of an event taking place in the subtle body. So what Vedanta would say is happening is the subtle body is leaving this body. And what is happening in the brain are just the signs of that. It's, if you will, it's like a spacecraft, a rocket taking off. And, the support structures on the launch pad, they sort of fall apart and it releases the rocket. So something like that probably, I don't know. But Vedanta, the literature is full of such descriptions of what happens at the point of death, how the subtle body leaves the physical body. Now, and suppose the physical body is not quite dead and it can be revived, and so the subtle body is still linked with the physical body, then you would expect it to settle back again into the physical body. And I suspect that's what a near-death experience is.
Wow. No, that gives a lot of insight. It's something we can really think about for sure. I also wanted to talk to you, and this is something that a lot of our internet viewers were kind of asking us on a lot of comments on our past videos. They were saying that we understand that we can achieve moksha, liberation, through knowledge. But what about karma? What about bhakti? And what about that aspect of surrendering to God? What role does that play?
Yes. Swami Vivekananda talked about the 4 yogas. It's just his classification. It's a masterly classification of various paths of spiritual practice. So any number of yogas are there. The Bhagavad Gita talks about each chapter as a yoga. So 18 chapters, 18 yogas. Now, what Swami Vivekananda did was, all these various paths, he classified them under 4 heads. And so that somehow it's caught on now. It's popular now, the 4 yogas. So there is the path of knowledge, the Jnana Yoga, which I often talk about. But there is the path of meditation, which is Raja Yoga. The path of devotion, surrender to God, faith, devotion, surrender. And there's the path of action, of selfless engagement with the world, Karma Yoga. Now, what are the roles of these yogas? It depends on what paradigm of spiritual life you're taking up. All these paradigms are true. But for example, if you take up the Advaita Vedanta paradigm, in that case, it's Jnana Yoga which is the top. Because the paradigm is all our problems are due to ignorance. Our real nature is already perfect. Nothing has to be done. In fact, nothing can be done. There, it's you're choicelessly Satchidananda. You are free. Only you don't know it. If you don't know it, the solution is to know it. And therefore, it follows, what Americans would call a no-brainer. It follows that Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, is the way which will lead to freedom. The path of knowledge, you practice that, you get knowledge, knowledge overcomes ignorance, and your ever-free nature is revealed to you. That is freedom according to Jnana Yoga. Now you ask, what about the others? What would a Jnana Yogi, what would Shankara and his followers say about meditation, about service, about devotion? They would say they are all very, very useful. They will not give you enlightenment and freedom immediately, but one cannot have enlightenment and freedom without them. So, in another way you can put it, they are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Enlightenment comes from knowledge. If you get knowledge by whatsoever means possible, you are enlightened. However, to get this knowledge, one needs preparation. And devotion, service, meditation, all are very powerful preparatory practices according to Advaita Vedanta. But if you change your paradigm, if you go to Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, another school of Vedanta, which is a primarily devotional school, where they will say, ultimately our problem is that our karma, we cannot free ourselves from our karma without the special grace of God. God is the ultimate reality of which we are a small part. Your knowledge can only take you so far. Ultimately, one has to have devotion to that God, which is the whole of this, of all of reality. And by the grace of God, we are freed from the bondage of karma. So they privilege bhakti yoga above the others. And they will say knowledge is useful and meditation is useful. And especially karma, in their case, it'll be more ritualistic karma. Actual, what you might call puja part, the rituals which we perform in temples and shrines. So depending on your paradigm, you will see one or the other of the yogas are raised in hierarchy, but the others are always, in Sanatana Dharma, all the yogas are there. So in Sanatana Dharma, in Hinduism, generally a spiritual practitioner would be devotional, would be have some component of study of Shastras and inquiry into Shastras, would have some component of meditation and some component of action. It might be ritualistic action, might be just pujas and fire sacrifices or something like that, but action. Swami Vivekananda, what he said was, his addition to this was, any one of these can lead you to enlightenment. And he said, by any one of them, by more than one of them, one of those four, or by all of them, be free. That is the whole of religion. Books, temples, doctrines, churches are secondary details.
Wow. We are talking about all these different paths to be able to reach that enlightenment state, to be able to, be liberated. But how much is really in our control? Like the concept, and many people are asking this, not only in our comments, but you see this all over social media, all over the internet. People are asking the concept of free will.
That always comes up in spiritual discussions. But I'll give you a common sense answer, which our monks would always give in reply to such questions. We don't ask such questions when it comes to the matters of the world. If I really want something, I go out and buy it or order it on Amazon or something like that. I don't sit around thinking, do I have the free will to order this or not? No. Only when it comes to spirituality, we drag our feet and say, oh, how much free will do I have in this case? But it's a deep question, regardless. So the first answer is a practical answer. Go ahead, jump into it, start working at it. So, engage yourself in service, engage yourself in devotional practices, study the scriptures, listen to lectures if you will on YouTube, whatever you do. And give it a good try. So that is, at the very least, it's a demonstration of our desire that I really want God. But now if you take it to a philosophical level and ask how much free will do we have, according to Vedanta, we actually do not. It's an interesting perspective. Swami Vivekananda said, free will is a contradiction in terms. The moment you say will is something exercised by the mind, by the person. I am exercising will. Already I am in the chain of causation. Some cause produces an effect becomes a cause, in turn produces another effect. So if I have the will, suppose I have the will to raise my hand right now, and I did it. Okay,
Yes.
so I did it. You did it too.
Sim. Yep.
Did we exercise our free will? It seems so. I want to raise my hand, I raised it. But that wanting to raise the hand, it's a thought. Where did that come from? It could have just been, I don't want to raise my hand. Do we have control over that thought? And if we control that thought, by controlling itself will be another thought. Where will that controlling thought come from? It's like you're standing in front of a deep well and you see bubbles coming up, but the depths from which the bubbles are coming up, we don't see it. So our thoughts are bubbling up from where we don't know. Therefore, it's all in a chain of causation. As Vivekananda said, free will is a contradiction in terms. And so, is there no freedom? Vedanta's answer is very interesting. It says, there is freedom, but no free will. Freedom as Atman, as pure consciousness, is your real nature, Atman, Brahman, you're free. That is freedom. Freedom from samsara. Freedom from limitation. Freedom to do what? Not to do. Even the idea to do something is also within limitation. When do I do something? And when I feel compelled to do something, when I want to do something, that means I'm already within the cause and effect link. It's not freedom. So freedom is only possible in the infinite, in the unlimited. Freedom is possible in the unlimited. Freedom is possible in the non-dual, where there is no second reality. This is in a deeply philosophical, metaphysical sense. Practically, however, notice all our life is predicated upon the existence of free will. You go to a shop to buy something. Obviously, the whole thing is set up on the understanding that customers have free will. Even advertisements, which aims to influence our decision. That means the advertisers are assuming that you have free will, and I'm trying to affect your free will to buy the product I want you to buy. Elections are going on in India now. All the idea of elections, vote for this or that, is predicated on the existence of free will. You are free to choose. Our entire legal system, courts and justice and all, why do you punish a person if there is no freedom? If a person has freely done something wrong, then only you say this person deserves punishment. Why do you give awards and honors and all? Is freely done something heroic and worthwhile. And therefore, if a person has been forced to do something wrong, even a judge will take that into account. Reduced freedom of action. So the liability is also less. If somebody holds a gun to my head and makes me do something, then you cannot punish me for it because I did not act freely. But courts, election system, democracy, consumer choice, all of these assume free will. And religion, what we are talking about, assumes free will. Why give advice otherwise? If a person is not free to follow the advice, why would you give advice? So, free will is practical purposes. Free will is admitted. Now you might say this is contradictory. Ultimately, there is no free will, but practically there is free will. Well, yep, it's a contradiction.
But being able to get liberated in this lifetime, could that be dependent on your past karma at all?
It is dependent on our past karma because our past karma produces this life. But liberation itself is not produced by past karma because of the simple reason in Advaita Vedanta, liberation is not produced. Liberation is our very nature, mukti, moksha swarupa, the very nature of the Atman or Brahman, what we are, not the body, not even the mind. Our Atman is ever free. Now what this world, our past karma and our sadhana, all of it can produce is the knowledge which will drive away the ignorance hiding the spiritual fact of our pre-existing liberation.
Wow. Now that we're diving so much deep into Vedanta, Vedanta, I wanted to talk about, Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya, right?
Okay, another deep question.
Another deep question, yes, but rooted into a practical aspect as well. So, concluding that the only truth is that we're Brahman, everything else is false, right? But when we are on a daily basis suffering, going through pain, right? We're dealing with daily life problems. How can we remind ourselves of that ultimate truth.
Daily life problems will remind us the only alternative is to suffer. Often, why do we come to spiritual life at all? If the world was perfect, if it can keep us engaged and happy, and then why look for anything else? But it can't. After some time, either the suffering becomes so intense, or you've got whatever you wanted and you're not satisfied. Then you start looking for something more. Is there anything more after you have enjoyed everything in life, which one can reasonably desire? Then do you want to keep on repeating that endlessly? Or our human nature is to seek something higher and better always. So we seek for something higher and better. Or the reverse. Suffering becomes so intense, you really want to release from that suffering. And therefore one seeks, is there a solution to suffering? That's what made Prince Siddhartha into the Buddha. He had both of these. He was a prince. He had all the pleasures and power which one could want, as in those days, a monarch, and absolute power. And that was not satisfying, but he was engaged in all of that, but it was not satisfying for him. On the other hand, he saw this old person, diseased person, and a dead person. So old age, disease, death, and these are universal. They come for everybody, and they are all full of suffering. Is there any solution to suffering? Not so much for himself, because he was having a good time, but he knew that the world around was pervaded by suffering. So whether you are enjoying or suffering, both of us ultimately drive us to this question about ultimate reality of spiritual life and the falsity of the world. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya.
No, I believe he said that everything in this world is dukkha. It's all
Sarvam Dukkham. It's all pervaded by sorrow. Even if you say, no, I'm having a good time, well, you're not seeing deeply enough. There is sorrow lurking there. The good time is going to end. Therefore, it is sorrow. To produce that good time, you have to work really hard, maybe earn money or use your past karma to have a pleasant time now. And that struggle is sorrow. And the good time, you get used to it. And so it's not so much fun the next day and the next day and the next day. And therefore, it diminishes. And that is sorrow. And these good times are habit forming. And there's a price to pay for that later on, and that is sorrow. So Buddha said everything here is pervaded by sorrow.
Swamiji, now that we're talking and touching a little bit of practical aspects of life and connecting that to Vedanta and spirituality, I wanted to talk about the concept of evil versus good, right? Bad versus good. And a lot of people ask this in our comments as well, where they're like, if the only truth is Brahman and everything else is false, if nothing else is real, if everything is an illusion, then how do we know that this is good and that's bad? What's the point of having a moral compass? Should we be making these decisions ourselves? Is there any kind of importance to doing a good action versus a bad action?
Yes, the bad and the good may both be relative. I won't say they are false. Let's use the word relative. They are relative. However, they are not equal and they are not unimportant. Yes, we are Brahman, but right now it doesn't seem to be so. If it seemed to be so, if it was an obvious fact, then our problems would be solved forever. But it's not an obvious fact at all. It's something that we read about, hear about. Maybe we get an inkling about it. Maybe we get some understanding about it sometimes. Then how do we make it a reality for ourselves? Or at least, even if it's a reality, how do we come to see it as a reality? How do we use it to go beyond suffering? First, at least for ourselves, if not for everybody else. And that's where good and evil come in. So from a Vedantic perspective, it is true. Both good and evil are relative. However, they're not equal. Evil takes you away from your own reality. Evil takes you away from spiritual life. And so evil produces more and more suffering. And good takes you towards spiritual realization. And here I'm talking about the good and evil in our own life. Then we'll talk about the world later. But in our own life, so it's not true that good and evil are equal. It doesn't matter. Both are illusions. Does the good act have... why should I go to the trouble of and the sacrifice of performing a good act if it has no value at all? No. It has the greatest value. It will take you, it will do you good in this life. It will do good to society and ultimately take you to liberation and freedom. So good is the basis of spiritual life. We can put it this way. Good is the foundation of God. So G-O-O-D, There is without goodness, spirituality is not possible. And the more mischievous and evil we are, the more we drift away from spiritual life. And the more deliberately good we try to be, the closer we are to spiritual life, closer we are to God, to enlightenment.